Welcome to the Vocal Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Martin Thomas. Join me and my guest speakers as we discuss their journey with their voice and how they use it to support their passions and professions in media, education and the performing arts. My guest this week is singing and music theory specialist and music consultant, Joanna Wilson. Our paths crossed recently through Joanna taking part in my Reset and Manifest pilot study, and it seems quite serendipitous for us both that we met by chance as we've connected on so many levels. Joanna started her musical career playing violin as a child and was fortunate to tour with Manchester Youth Orchestra before moving to London to start her professional training at 18. As you'll discover, Joanna had to move on from the violin, and it is here she moved into her singing training, from which she went on to work as a professional opera singer, living the 8 shows a week lifestyle before branching into teaching others from 2009. It's not always been easy, but it is helpful to hear about the struggles as well as the successes and note the value in all that we experience. Even the toughest of times that might have felt heartbreaking at the time can steer us onto our true path. Joanna's positive outlook on life is a joy to be around. So let's dig in and find out more about her together. So welcome to the podcast, Joanna Wilson. How are you today? The first question I have for you, which is a biggie, isn't it, is how would you describe the journey with your voice?
Oh, that is a big one. Well, I started singing in church as a child and then joined the school choir. And it was quite a big part of my life. You know, the school choir also sung in the church services and weddings, funerals, requiems, etc. But it was always in the background because from the age of 7, my chosen instrument was the violin. I played the violin all through school, through sixth form. Music was so much a part of my life. But by doing that, it took me and my twin sister into all kinds of adventures at quite an early age, travelling around Europe with the Manchester Youth Orchestra and those kind of experiences. And it was amazing because, we came from a fairly working class background and music gave us opportunities that we wouldn't have had otherwise, which I'd always be eternally grateful for. And it really fueled my love of travel and my sort of wanderlust and my love of different cultures and music from all over the world. And so the singing for most of my sort of school life was something that I did in church. But then I eventually got into music college and I left home at 18 from Lancashire, where I grew up. Came to London, to the big city. Oh my goodness, what a shock that was, Suddenly I was a very small fish in a very big sea. And I started a 4-year performance and teaching diploma on the violin. And somewhere along the line, I realised that being a professional violinist in an orchestra was not necessarily going to be my path, mostly because of some health issues. My sister and I both had osteoarthritis from a very young age, and I found that the physical problems were starting to hold back my technique, which was really frustrating to me because music was all I'd ever known and all I'd ever done and what I was mostly good at. I was always very artistic. I did much better at school in the creative rather than the more academic subjects. But, of course, I'd always sang. And at music college, I was also in the choir and a couple of small vocal ensembles. And I decided to switch my first study from violin to singing. And I discovered the most amazing teacher, Elizabeth Hawes. We all called her Libby, who's just fabulous. She was the head of the singing department. And she was, even then, she was quite mature in age. She'd been teaching most of her life. And she was such a huge inspiration to me. And she said to me, look, we've got all this natural talent here. Why don't you switch studies and continue your course as a singer so that you don't have to just stop and give it all up? So the singing to me is massive because it freed me up as a musician. It allowed me to continue as a musician. It allowed me to still express myself through music. I hadn't had any official lessons up to that point. So there was a lot of catching up to do. And Libby said to me, okay, we're going to fill you up like an empty jug. We're just going to put all the technique in under your natural ability, under your natural expression. Because I had a very emotional, very expressive kind of voice. Even more so than I did when I was a violinist, I remember my violin teacher used to say to me, if you can sing it, you can play it. And we'd often do sort of mental practice where we were away from the music, but we were singing the Bach or the Beethoven or whatever we were learning, so that you'd get that mental oral memory.
Yeah.
So we did that. And I was in the final year. I was in my 4th year of the 4-year course. And I'd already done the other modules. I'd already done all the other parts of the exam, but the practical. I managed to get a couple of extra years, a couple of post-grad years from my local education authority at the time. This was well before student loans. And I got the 2 years. So I'd done 3 years violin, and then I did the last year on the singing, and then got a couple more years. So I was able to catch up with all the classes and, the German lieder and the Italian opera. And we had all these wonderful teachers coming in from all around, people who'd been wonderful professional singers. And we had Tina Ruta from the Opera House coming in. And we had all this coaching, and, there was all the languages to catch up on. And so those 2 years were pretty intense, but I suddenly felt freed. Now I could express myself and my music and my emotions, but without pain, without any physical restrictions,
Yeah.
My career went off in other directions, when I graduated from college. And also the final year was wonderful because I'd been entering competitions all the way through my college years and getting into the finals for the French song, English song, German lieder, etc. But then in my final year, I actually won the Leavers Prize, which was the Singing Faculty Award. And that was wonderful for me because I really felt that I was actually on an even footing as a singer, even though I'd had to really catch up and I started really late. It made me feel that I was a part of that, part of the rest of my graduating peers.
Yeah, that's lovely.
It was wonderful. And I was invited back a year later to do an inaugural recital, and all my family came, and it was just wonderful.
Oh, how lovely. Would you remember what you sang in your the one that you won the award for?
Oh, well, it was mostly my favourites. I love French song, and there was a bit of Debussy in there. There was a little bit of Poulenc. I know there was definitely a couple of opera arias, probably something from Carmen.
Yeah.
It was my sort of favourite songs. So there was a mixture of art songs and opera arias, I think, from what I can remember. It's a long time ago now.
Yeah.
It was definitely my favourite. So that was a real highlight. And so my career went in different directions, and I went into different careers. And when you're needing to just make a living, and suddenly you've got rent to pay and student debts to pay off, etc.
And I call it life takes over.
Yes, absolutely. Life took over for quite some time. But I did finally start to get some professional work. I started to do some corporate work and lots of functions and lots of opera choruses. And then eventually I had many years where I was working with Carl Rosa Opera, Gilbert and Sullivan International Opera, and that took me on tour all over the country. It took me up to the beautiful Buxton Opera House, which I sung in every year. It was just a joy, with a wonderful family of beautiful people who were all from different ages, different walks of life, who all came together every year, and they did these fabulous festivals, and it was just fabulous. I loved it. I felt like I was living my best life, doing all the traveling, which I love, in costumes, makeup, wigs,
so exciting.
Huffing around on stage with dance numbers and singing. It was like everything all in one,
Yeah.
I was living my best life. I loved it. But that life, I found, was also full of stress. Despite when I was working, how much I enjoyed it, I was trying to do it on my own. I didn't really have an agent. And I realised you're only really as good as your last booking. And I was constantly having to generate work for myself whilst working. So I'd be in a contract, doing 8 shows a week. And I'd be in the daytime, in the mornings, travelling up and down the country, doing auditions, trying to generate the next job. Sometimes in the daytime, trying to get back for the evening show. I mean, there was a lot going on. It was quite crazy. And then, occasionally I'd get the next job and it would be great. And I'd be able to relax knowing that when that contract came to an end, there'd be another one. But when I didn't get the job, the reality was I was back in the dog queue, in between. And I found that very stressful. So it kind of started to take some of the shine off a little bit of doing what I loved, doing my passion, the actual stress of earning a living out of it.
Yeah.
My peers who were having a stress-free time were those who were either married and they had a husband who could support them in between contracts, or, you know, some of them were still living with their parents in their 30s. And it just meant that in between contracts, they were all right. They didn't have to worry about keeping a roof over their head, you know.
Yeah.
Then as I got older, I started teaching on the side. Quite a lot of crazy opportunities came into my life. And I started working in a nursery school as a music teacher and creative arts teacher. And it was wonderful to work with the little toddlers. Oh, that made me think of I started to see life in a different way, Lee. It was like you look through their eyes and you see the wonder of everything. And I really enjoyed that for a while. And then that led to me deciding to do some private teaching, and the singing got less and the teaching got more. And then it kind of took over and became my day job. And eventually I founded my business, Miss Joanna's Music Box. And I'm now teaching private singing and group singing and theory. And I've also set myself up as a sort of consultant for other nurseries that may want to have music incorporated into their daily schedule, and how to do that. So I do workshops. I mean, I don't get much singing work now. I anticipate that at some point I will go back to it, but more on an amateur level, so that I'll join a choir and then I'll just enjoy singing for the joy of it, rather than with the stress of making a living. Because now I'm enjoying the teaching so much.
Do you find any differences teaching classical and non-classical singers?
So I find that the techniques, when used correctly with a healthy voice, are the same. I mean, I'll give you an example. I taught a chap for a while who was a rapper and who did hip hop. And he was absolutely wonderful. He was a dancer. He had this amazing personality. And I discovered that the techniques he needed to be able to get through a long phrase of very fast words, to have clear diction, to be able to sustain the breath so that he could get through that phrase without breaking it up, and with the kind of support that kept his voice well-rounded and easy to listen to, was exactly the same as what a classical or opera singer would use to sustain a long phrase. You know, you're singing Handel and you've got all those runs all over the place and there's nowhere to breathe. And to keep the tone of the sound going in that, with the very clear diction, singing through the vowels and keeping your consonants nice and clear. I found they were the same.
Yeah.
So the only kind of difference when I'm teaching a pop singer is the style of the music, the part of the voice we're using, and, you know, that they may be mic'd up, you know. And I always say to my students, you know, all the microphone is going to do is amplify your sound. If your sound is like a flat line and there's no tone and there's no emotion and there's no feeling in it, well, it's just going to be louder.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a dancer also, so it's always been very important to me. And my students, I always warn them in advance. I say, the first few sessions are going to consist of physical stretches, you know, correct posture, vocal physiology, breathing exercises before we even sing a note.
Yeah.
You know, and they're all prepared for that. And they know, you know, they'll say, we're going to do any bit. Oh, yes, we will. We're going to do those. Don't worry. I've got loads of tongue twisters. I've got loads of vocal exercises. We'll do them. But I want to know that this breathing technique is in your body first. And I always start from that point with everybody. Once the singer puts a piece of music in front of them and they're concentrating on the notes and the rhythm and the words, they can forget what's going on in their body. It's a bit like when you're dancing and someone gives you all the footwork and they say, right, we're going to do arms now. And you go, oh, I've forgotten what I'm doing with my feet, you know. So which is why I find it so important to get that well established first before we do any music. And then we can adapt, we can apply those techniques to the song and to the music, phrase by phrase, chunk by chunk. And that's how I tend to work. Singing to me and my voice is everything, because it's allowed me the life I have now. It's given me some amazing experiences and taken me to some fantastic places and met wonderful people. And now it's my job. It's, you know, my voice is my job now, and I use it every day in order to inspire the next generation.
Absolutely. We're both on the same page with that. We love our work, don't we? So obviously, with all these adventures of travelling around and going off, I mean, even like if I go back a bit to when you were in school and playing violin with your sister, have you got any sort of places that you went with the orchestra that really just gave you a bit of an event where you saw yourself, this is the life I want?
Yes. I mean, we got to play, well, most of the orchestral trips that we went on were exchanges with other schools and other youth orchestras who we went to, and then they came to us, and then we did the same, and there was all the hospitality and everything was thrown in, One of my lasting memories is when we went to Venice. We actually toured around that part of Italy. We went to lots of different places. We stayed in this huge complex, sort of with the Umbrian Mountains in the background. And then we travelled. So we'd get up in the morning and we'd get on a coach and we'd get all our instruments in a van and we'd go to the next town and we'd set up, usually in the town square or the town hall, either outdoors or indoors, depending on what the weather was like. And we'd have a rehearsal. We'd get back on a coach, go back to the accommodation. The next day, do a different place. So we didn't really get to see these places very much.
Yes, of course.
We went to Venice, Padua, Pisa, all of those places around that region. Veneto, Vittorio, I think it's called. I might be wrong, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember it again. I was about 16 or 17. And it just had such an impact on me. The beauty of Venice, the history, and all of this music. Everywhere you went, there was music. There were street musicians playing in the piazzas. There were opera singers standing on the corner with the fabulous acoustic, because you've got the canal and the bridges and all the walls around you. And the sound would just bounce off. And we did a fantastic concert, which was in a town square that had a sloped sort of cobbled floor, but it was a natural amphitheatre. The actual buildings around it was this natural amphitheatre. I'll never forget it because the weather was balmy summer evenings, we was playing the orchestra and there was swallows, flitting from building to building as the sun went down. And there was all this audience of, very beautifully dressed and well turned out Italians who'd come to hear us. And it was just magical. And I thought, oh my God, this is the life I want. Yeah. I mean, we were playing mostly sort of chamber music, string orchestra type music, or we'd do a couple of nice symphonies. And I think there was one concert where we had a mezzo-soprano soloist. It may have been something like Mahler 4, possibly. And I was just entranced. I listened to her and I was like, oh my goodness, that's what I want to. I want to stand up there in front of the orchestra, And then of course, when my voice really developed, I was a mezzo as well. Yeah. I've never been a high soprano, and I did achieve eventually. I think towards the end of my years in music college, I went to Trinity. I did finally have my sort of debut when we did The Kingdom with the college orchestra and choir, and I actually got to stand on the stage of the Queen Elizabeth Hall with the other soloist in a big gown, and this was the 80s, so the gowns were big, and
great big meringue thing.
Remember those Laura Ashley with the big leather button sleeves? Everyone was in those.
Yes,
and I did, and my mum came down from Manchester, and it was another wonderful moment when I was like, yeah, I used to be back there in the orchestra. Now I'm at the
front. Oh, that's so exciting. Oh, that's so exciting. Have you got some lovely photos of you in brilliant costumes over the years?
I have. Yeah,
I bet you have.
There's a few crazy ones on my website, mostly from my time at the Books and Opera House. There's a few crazy costumes.
Oh,
not many. I only put a few on my website because obviously, it gets a little yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So along the way, is there anything that you now know that you wish you'd learned sooner?
I've had a lot of personal growth recently, certainly in the past year. And I've really had the time to concentrate on meditating, yoga, doing work on my mindset, eliminating all the limiting beliefs and negative self-talk, things that I realize have come right from my childhood, and learning how to manifest and set intentions and have gratitude every morning, that kind of thing. And I think that when I was tearing around in my 20s and 30s and, working so hard and trying to really strive to make something of my life, I wish I'd known this then, because I think my life might have been calmer and maybe other opportunities would have come my way as well. I mean, I don't have any regrets.
I was going to say that sounded slightly regretful, but you don't regret it.
No, I don't have regrets. I mean, my life went in a different direction to what I thought it would, but it's all come to a good place now. And I've realised that all of that journey has been on on its way to here, and that all those experiences were valid and needed to get to this point. But I think they would have been really helpful tools to help me deal with stress. And, now I know that stress is the biggest contributor to health issues, and it gets in the way of your well-being. And I worry sometimes about the long-term effects that kind of stress in 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. So, yeah, if I'd known about this earlier, I think life would have been a little calmer. And because I did tend to be very high energy and very manic in those days.
Yeah, actually, to be fair, I think we've been speaking quite a lot recently, haven't we? Because you've taken part in the Reset Manifest course that I did as a pilot subject, which has been brilliant. I have to say thank you again for all your valuable feedbacks. It's been really helpful. But we have found that getting to know each other, that there's been all these different, even though we've had different careers and different types of singing, we've had these parallels. And some of it relates really to the relationship we have with our voice and the relationship we have with ourselves. So I wondered if we could sort of go off on a tangent on that for a few minutes, just to let our listeners know how that sort of journey is really important as well. The inner critic versus the inner coach. And I think what I'm doing now is trying to encourage people to really work on their inner coach, so that the inner critic hasn't got such a big voice. How do you feel about that?
Oh gosh, yeah, I totally agree. And again, this past year has given me the chance to be my inner coach, because you're so busy trying to work and strive and move forward that you forget to just be present. And so, in some ways, the pandemic has been a very positive experience for me. And I know, obviously, for a lot of people, it's been tragic and terrible, but it's given me a chance to go inward, and to really look inside myself. And realise that quite a lot of the obstacles that I thought had happened to me and come into my life actually was me getting in my own way. And so, because of this work I've been doing, because your Reset and Manifest has been amazing, and I love it. But I'd also started doing other courses. I've done the Deepak Chopra 21-day abundance challenge, and I've been learning all about my health and the gut and the biome and eating better, and there's been a whole quite a holistic approach over the past year to sort of improving things in my life and getting healthier as I get older. But certainly the limiting beliefs, my goodness, it made me realize that a lot of it came from my childhood. The narrative, the sort of especially around money, when people are always saying, money is the root of all evil, and, who do you think I am, Rothschild, and we can't afford it. And, that was a lot of that and many other expressions to do with money when I was growing up. And it made me feel maybe that wasn't for me, and that, that stay in your lane,
Yeah.
And I didn't really dream big. When it came to the music, I did, Lee, because I've just remembered when I was a child, I was quite ambitious, and I would always say to my mum, I'm going to do this. And then she'd be so proud of me when I did. So, for example, I went to, I'm going off on a tangent again, sorry, but...
You're allowed, it's all right.
With the school choir, we were taken to the Free Trade Hall, which was the main concert hall in Manchester at the time. And we went to see a wonderful concert with Yehudi Menuhin as the soloist, and the Halley Orchestra. And I sat there and I said, I can't remember now, we were definitely with our music teacher, but I think parents were allowed to come. And I sat there and said, I'm going to play on that stage. And my mum said, oh, that's a good ambition to have. Well, good luck. And then not long after, probably only a few years later, I must have been about 11 or 12 when we went to the concert. A few years later, with the Manchester Youth Orchestra, I played on that stage in the Free Trade Hall with Yehudi Menuhin as the soloist doing the Beethoven Violin Concerto.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, there was all these weird kind of parallels where I'd say, I'm going to do that. And I didn't know then I was manifesting and setting my intentions, but I know now that it was such a strong, and then one day we went for a day out in Derbyshire with my mum, and we would we were looking all around the countryside and walking, and we went to Buxton and we found the Buxton Opera House, which is just glorious. One of those beautiful ornate theatres with the red velvet chairs and just gorgeous, and the surroundings with the square and everything and the old buildings, and it's just lovely. And I said to my mom, I looked up at the sort of dome and I said to my mom, I'm going to sing on that stage one day. And then for years and years, I sang on that stage, 8 shows a week, So I just, it's funny, isn't it, how you only really kind of realise these things when you look back on them many years later, that even back then I was manifesting and setting my intentions.
Yeah.
But despite all the limiting beliefs, despite all of those things around money, I found that music kind of elevated me out of that kind of working class mindset. And the people I was mixing with were very different. They were, I suppose, I don't like to talk about class, but they were much more privileged. They'd had a lot more than we did. They were much, well, I won't say better educated, because we had an amazing education in our grammar school. Our state grammar school was fabulous education, all-round education. But these people seemed more worldly, and they seemed, because of my music and because of the violin and because of the singing, I was able to then mix in these societies, I suppose. I was able to go to a concert or do a recital and be able to converse and have meaningful conversations with people from all walks of life, and feel that I could be part of that I was equal to them.
Well, you are.
Of course I was, but brought up with this kind of working class mentality that you kind of, so it brought me up into something a little more cultured, and the music did that for me. The music and the art and the dance and everything just elevated my education and completed my education in a way. Well, it's never complete. We never stop learning.
Yeah, we never stop learning. I know what you mean.
It certainly helped to complete my school education. And so I found that I didn't feel like a fish out of water, when I was at a drinks party or afterwards, after a recital, often people would get together for a little social, and I felt at home there, and it was the music that did that,
So you and music go hand in hand. You're
they do.
Absolutely. Music and school and instruments now, it's almost like that's a privilege, isn't it? It's not necessarily something...
mainstream.
It's not mainstream anymore. And it's so important, isn't it, for kids to be able to express themselves and find a means to express themselves, whether that's through voice or singing or an instrument or whatever. And I was just wondering, with you working with the little ones, do you see that there's a sort of link in being more connected to the world through expression and music?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Singing makes you happy, doesn't it? It releases all the happy hormones and all those endorphins. And when you see children who are excited and they're singing and dancing and clapping and doing a few little movements, they're living their best life. They're so happy, It's for them, and I think certainly for very little ones, 2 and 3 year olds, sometimes they're not listened to, they're not heard. Sometimes they're dismissed. And when it comes to something like singing, you get everybody's attention, when you're with the grandparents and you suddenly sing a song, everyone's listening, everyone's encouraging you, and then giving you wonderful positive feedback afterwards. If they'd actually got the courage to stand up and sing in front of everyone, and it didn't really matter if it was beautiful or not for us, but because for them they were having a moment, and imagine how disappointed they feel after opening their hearts like that, to then have everyone go, oh, okay, who's next then? Are you going to play the recorder for us or whatever?
Oh, I know.
So, so I would always use very much positive reinforcement for everything.
Yes.
And even when I was teaching the toddlers, I would devise a lesson plan that consisted of, little songs and nursery rhymes that would, and we always had shakers and bells and things, they didn't realise they were just having fun when I was teaching them about tempo and about rhythm and about pitch and about dynamics,
Yeah.
And all of these things, and they didn't realise it. We were doing songs, where we were singing loud and soft and fast and slow, and we would have movements to go with everything. And one of the things I realised was that keeping things fun and interactive and keeping them involved. I wasn't just the only person with the shaker; they had one each in their hands as well. Keeping them involved, keeping them engaged was the key to raise the energy, encourage a passion and a love of music, just like I had.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'd bring in an instrument and blow all their minds,
Yeah. So how do you do that?
One day I brought a violin, and another day I brought in a flute, another day I brought in a guitar, and then we'd make our own out of tissue boxes and toilet roll holders.
Oh, that sounds so much fun.
So at that age, what was important to me was to instill a love and a passion of music rather than have a lot of little potential singers, you know. And then also when I think about my musical education, learning about the classical composers and the countries they came from and their lifestyles and the centuries they came from and the history of it. The music then became a geography lesson and a history lesson. Yeah. And, you learned about, you only had to look at Strauss and you were learning about Vienna and the waltzes and the history at the time. And the same with Mozart. Music became so much more than just music. It really gave you a more rounded education. And so I'm a huge believer in this. And I was very lucky, I went to a good grammar school and we had like music centres that were run by the local education authority, run by the council. Okay. So we could go and have violin lessons or whatever lessons after school, and it was all provided for. We didn't have to pay. We were so lucky. I mean, obviously when we went on tours abroad and things like that, parents would have to help out, but it was wonderful to have this provided. Nowadays, of course, unless you're in an arts ed school or an academy, you don't get those lessons in your day-to-day. It's not part of the curriculum, which I think is very sad.
I do.
Although on the other side of that, if it wasn't for parents encouraging their children to have private lessons, I wouldn't have a career.
Yeah. What else do you love about the voice as an instrument and working with new students?
I love that, your body is your instrument and every voice is completely individual and different. Yes. And that every new student I have, I've got a whole, clean slate to start
yes.
with. It's wonderful.
I love that too. Absolutely love that too.
And I get great feedback from parents who say, wow, my daughter's really talented, but she had problems with her confidence. And everyone knew how talented she was but her. And you've really brought that out and you've helped instill the confidence in her. And now that's reaching into all the areas of her life as well now. Yeah. She's saying yes to things that she maybe wouldn't have said yes to before. Now she's believing in herself more. And
so, it's so important, isn't it? It's so important.
And I know you like to kind of, teach the whole person, not just the voice. And yeah. I'm getting that way myself, where I'm really trying to sort of encourage that confidence in their lives, not just in their voice. And if they've got exams coming up, I'll do a kind of countdown to exams and I'll send them meditation audios and they'll be like, oh my God, I played this to my brother as well and he thought it was fabulous, and now we're all doing it before bed. Yeah,
it's brilliant.
It's wonderful. I have to say, it really is the most rewarding job. And I've realized that when you're doing what you absolutely love, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, that's the great thing, isn't it? It really is the great thing. I remember, I can't remember who it was. Somebody said to me as a kid, you're winning at life if you can find something you love and get paid for it. Find something you love doing and then get paid for it. And that's kind of like, well, we've got there. I've gone around the houses a little bit, but
took me long enough. Yeah.
Now
getting into the autumn years, it took me long enough. But hey, it's never too late, is it, Lee?
Never too late. It's very easy with the society we have now, isn't it? Because everything moves so quickly and there's so much technology and there's so much distraction. It's very easy to kind of lose yourself or, lose that part of yourself that reminds you what you're here to do. So, your ikigai, we won't get into that.
We could talk my life purpose.
Oh, it's brilliant. So I'd love to ask you about what voices inspire you, actually, Joanna. Are there any particular favourite singers that you've loved over the years, or who you connect to musically? Who could you never tire of listening to?
So many. Okay. I'll try and kind of just go with the main ones because there's a long list. So many voices have inspired me. I mean, I grew up listening to the music of my parents. My dad loved jazz and blues, and so we was always listening to Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, and he loved the Glenn Miller Orchestra and all that kind of jazz. And he guarded his vinyl collection with his life. He was the only one allowed to touch it and clean it and put it on the turntable, but we all enjoyed listening to it. And so from a very early age, I was influenced by jazz. My mum loved the kind of rock and roll and the music you could dance to. And both my parents actually used to dance ballroom together. We used to go out on a Saturday night, and that's how they met. But she used to love the rock and roll. She used to love to jive. And so I had a lot, there was Elvis in the house and there was Bill Haley in the Comets and all that. But certainly Ella Fitzgerald, out of that part of my life, was the one that stuck. And, I still think she's, the ultimate singer. The way she uses a voice like a sax or a trumpet, like an instrument,
Absolutely.
And I actually got to see Ella Fitzgerald
Oh my gosh. Tell me.
Live at the Royal Albert Hall.
Oh.
I think it must have been about 89. And it was when Jazz FM launched for the first time. And they had this amazing concert at the Royal Albert Hall where all the great jazz singers came. We had a whole list of amazing singers, and Ella was the headliner.
I bet.
She was very old.
Yeah.
She could hardly see. She was walking with a stick because, she was diabetic and she had all kinds of health issues and complications for that. And she came onto the stage and she sat on a stool. It was one of the highlights of my life.
Wow, I bet.
And I forget it to see her live. And that was actually the last time that she visited the UK before she died.
Oh.
So that was a real privilege to see her. So Ella was my first big influence. And I have had the chance to sing jazz and blues myself over the years. I used to have a band with my ex, and we used to do quite a lot of corporate gigs, and I was always the singer. And that was fun to do a different style,
Mm.
And then I think sort of more in my school years, I was hugely influenced by Barbra Streisand. I couldn't believe that anyone could sing like that. I think that's what inspired my interest in vocal technique. I would always be, how does she hold that note on for so long? How does she sing so low and then so high? And I think that's where it all started, this curiosity into the physiology of the voice. And how do you do that, And so, Barbra Streisand was huge. And of course, then we had, what was that single she did with Donna Summer?
Oh gosh, No More Tears.
Yeah,
Enough is enough. Yeah. Oh my God.
I mean, all that, and that was that era, that time, And then, of course, at music college, even though I was there as a violinist, I discovered opera singing, and I found it, to me, it was like, I've always been a very emotional, very romantic person, and to me, an opera, like going to see something like Madame Butterfly or I don't know. La Boheme.
Yeah.
For me, it was like the ultimate romantic medium. To go on that roller coaster of emotions, up and down. Just letting the tears flow and just being able to be taken on that journey with the characters. I found it amazing, and it didn't help with my relationships in my 20s because I kind of expected life to be like that.
Yeah, no, isn't it disappointing?
I was quite disappointed. I was.
Disappointing we don't get all the drama.
But certainly, I mean, whilst all my peers were raving about Maria Callas, I was, discovering that I was a mezzo-soprano. I was drawn more towards the warmer, fuller tones. I was singing alto in the choir, and I was listening to Maria Ewing singing Carmen, and Sarah Walker and Sophie von Otter, and these warm, rich kind of, I tend to think of the soprano like the sort of sparkling wine.
Yes.
And the mezzo like the full-bodied red.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
But I was drawn towards those sounds, and I had the privilege of seeing Anne-Sophie von Otter at the Wigmore Hall live when she was quite young, and she was just starting out. Wow. And I never forgot that. And I picked up loads of wonderful repertoire from that as well. I think that's when I started singing the French chanson, and loving. And I did French at school, so it was kind of, from all the languages I had to learn as a singer, French was the one that came the most naturally to me.
Yes, that makes sense.
So I loved singing Poulenc and Debussy and Fauré and all that. I just loved it. And I was into Cecilia Bartoli for a little bit. I loved her precision, her clarity when she was singing Mozart, the way she would use every note. But then ultimately came the grande dame, my absolute favourite singer in the world across all types and genres is Jessye Norman.
Oh my goodness.
Once I discovered her, it was like, okay, yeah, bye. No, not really. I still listen to them, but it was like, okay, now this is the one. You know? Like finding your true love.
Do you remember what your first song by Jessye Norman was? Do you remember, can you remember what the impact of that?
The first recording that I heard of hers, which still is a favourite now, was her recording of Richard Strauss's 4 Last Songs. I love the way she interprets his music, the way that she uses her voice. Not only is her voice extremely powerful, but it's so sensitive. The way that she soars up into the higher notes, especially on a crescendo, it just turns me to jelly. I feel the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I go, it just has an effect on me. And the 4 Last Songs were so poignant. I think they were the final songs that Strauss wrote in his life as well. I think they were even the songs themselves weren't published till after he died.
Oh, wow.
By a friend of his, and they turned out to be like his swan song as well. So I think being called the Four Last Songs was just beautiful, and it's just remained. It's one of those recordings that I never ever tire of. Doesn't matter how many thousands of times I hear it, it will always have the same effect. It will always turn me to jelly, hairs on the back of the neck. Particularly number 3 of the Four Last Songs, Beim Schlafen gehen, which is the one which translates to while falling asleep. It alludes to death. But it's one of the most beautiful. When you listen to it, you imagine the soul leaving the body and just rising into heaven or whatever you believe in, And there's a moment in it where she sings the main melody, and then a violin solo comes in. And then she sings the same melody as the violin solo with her voice, and it just crescendos and soars and soars. And it's just bliss. To me, it's like if there's such a place as heaven, that's what it sounds like.
Yes.
It's that moment in that song that I love it so much. I'm like, I want it played at my funeral and my memorial service.
Wow,
It's just unbelievable. And that was the first time I ever heard her voice. And of course, I've listened to many of her recordings and operas since then. But I think she became a bit of a specialist when it came to Richard Strauss's music. It's never left me. And I discovered it in the 80s, and it still stands up as my favourite.
Did you ever get to see Jessye Norman?
I never saw her live, sadly. But I did see a lot of her filmed opera performances. Yeah. And every now and then I'll see a wonderful quote by her on, a singers group on Facebook or something where she's talking about vocal physiology and pedagogy, as she calls it. She'd be interviewed, about her life by someone, I don't know, let's say Parky. And she'd be talking about these important things that she wished everyone would learn. And it would just validate and reinforce everything that I was teaching, or thinking of teaching at the time.
Yeah.
It was just so inspiring to have someone with such an inspirational voice to also talk about technique.
Yes.
That way, it made you think I'm on the right path,
That's perfect. That's so perfect. What does your voice mean to you?
I suppose it means freedom because of my story, because of the, almost having to give it all up because of a health issue and a physical obstacle. My voice means freedom to me. In the context of singing, it's being able to express myself and my emotions through music without feeling pain, without feeling difficult, without feeling stress. And, using those breathing vocal techniques to free my voice in a relaxed sound, which is what I teach. I suppose in the context of speaking, I'm a communicator. That's I've always been that way. It helps me feel confident, feel sure of myself. I find it completely liberating, to be able to speak my truth now. I think I spent quite a lot of my 20s and 30s people pleasing, maybe saying what I thought people wanted to hear, trying to keep my man happy in relationships and not always speaking up when needed.
I think so many people will relate to that.
Yeah,
I think for anyone listening who's sort of over 40, really, it's quite easy to look back on your 20s and 30s and not so much think, well, what was I thinking? But I do think you go through a couple of decades of just finding what it is you want to do. And even if you're listening to this and you're in your 20s and you're like, I know what I want to do, I'm going to do that. You might find that your life will give you a few turns in the road. It's interesting, isn't it?
It doesn't always go the way you plan, but wherever it goes is where it's meant to go.
Exactly. I truly believe in that.
And I think certainly I was always a bit of an agony aunt with my friends as well, and my friends would always come to me with their relationship issues and want to have some advice from me. A lot of my friends are younger than me as well, so they'd see me as that kind of auntie figure.
Yeah.
And now I'm much better at speaking the truth, saying what I really feel and what I think they really need to hear, not what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And at whatever the cost that may be, they may not like what I'm saying, but I'm being true to myself and I'm saying what I think is going to be helpful. And, in the end, they're often quite grateful for my honesty, when they realise that actually, everyone else has been just saying what they think they want to hear. And now they're hearing something that is a hard truth to hear, but necessary. So I'm getting much better at speaking my truth. And I'm getting, so much better at saying no. I mean, goodness me, I don't think I knew the meaning of the word when I was younger. I mean, I say no now. I'm getting much better at walking away from things. about not overstretching and overwhelming myself by saying yes. I mean, there was times in my 30s when I'd actually double book because I didn't want to offend someone, and then I'd be running around like a headless chicken trying to commit to the things I'd said yes to. And now I'm much better at saying no. I know what my boundaries are. I know what my limits are. I know how much energy I have. I know how much I can do in a day.
Yeah.
And I'm much better at saying no. And that's been, again, liberating.
Absolutely true. Yeah, I can certainly relate to that, having gone through many years of just work. And then you kind of look back on it and go, what was I thinking? It was too much. Yeah. And you forget. I think it's very easy. And loads of teachers I know who I've worked with over the years who will go, that's what you do, because when you are someone who wants to help others, you can quite easily neglect yourself in the process because you're so giving and you're so wanting to help other people.
Absolutely. And I am quite a giving personality, and I'm very much an empath as well, and I really feel what other people feel, and I really kind of take on board people's energy and their vibe, and I have to be really careful about that and kind of set my boundaries.
I'm going to wrap with this last question because it's going to be awesome. I think it relates so much to what you just said about what your voice means to you. But I'd love to know what vocal freedom is for you. What does it mean to you?
I think speaking your truth, being true to yourself, speaking from your heart, from your gut, just from your mind, listening to that voice and being able to express it. And listening to yourself as well, listening to your inner voice, I think is really important. And that's a skill I've only learned in the last few years, And
when we build that connection with ourselves, we can also look at how that translates to understanding a character and character development. So what advice would you give to your students with that?
Put yourself in the character of the person who's singing this song. Research the backstory, understand who they are and who you are portraying so that you can tell their story and so that your voice can move the listeners and take them on an emotional journey. But you can kind of in some ways tell your story through the character because whatever emotions and experiences they're having are the human condition, aren't they?
That's it. And you've got to pull from your own experiences to go and portray that.
I remember my teacher when I was 18, no, probably 20, saying to my lovely singing teacher, Libby Hawes, I want to sing Carmen. And she said, right, well, let's wait till you've got a bit more life experience and you think about it in your late 30s. Then you'll have what's necessary to sing Carmen.
Yeah. Age appropriate. It's really necessary, especially with younger kids.
Yeah.
So important.
Age appropriate, yes. I've often had, a very sort of pre-teen bringing me a really teen type song.
Yeah.
A boy that's left her, and then I'm like,
you just go
something else.
Yeah.
Because it's not appropriate, but also, almost kind of gender appropriate as well. Sometimes, not always. I find that quite often with the folk songs that my students choose for their exams. Quite often it's from a male narrative and it's singing about his beautiful lady and etc. And quite often I say to them, fine, if you love the song, we'll sing it, and you sing it as a boy.
Yeah.
But there are some times when it just doesn't work because of the context of the song, and I have to say to them, steer them in another direction and say, let's have a look at this one. I think this will suit you better. And the other thing is, because our voices are so connected with our emotions, I insist that my students relate to the song and like the song. There's no point in saying, I know some teachers say, right, these are your pieces for your grade 3 or whatever, and they just give them to them. I have to go through that process with my students.
Oh, totally. Me too.
Ideas, and then they choose, and they go, no. Oh, that's a possibility. And then we look at it together. And it's so important to me that they love the songs because they're going to be singing them for quite a while if they're working on them for an exam, maybe a whole term or longer. And they're going to get so bored and they're going to hate it if they don't relate.
Yes.
So I make it very a priority that my singers have to choose songs that they like, that they relate to, and that they are never going to really tire of, hopefully.
We're so like kindred spirits on this completely. And I think that the reason that is so important, like you say, apart from the fact that they'll get bored with it, they might lose their passion for it entirely if you just, and also I never wanted to be a teacher that's just an instructor. These are the rules, this is what you do, because you're not really having a relationship with that student. I think student-led learning in terms of listening to what they want to do and then guiding them along that path so that they get to achieve what they want. It's so important.
It's so important, yeah.
What's coming up for Joanna? Have you got some lovely things you can tell our listeners about that you're getting up to now?
Yes. I mean, I've been teaching one-to-one singing lessons for about 10 years now. 10 years, really? It's about 10 years. I can't believe it. And then I started teaching one-to-one theory lessons for grades 1 to 5 for ABRSM. I've recently branched out to the Trinity Rock and Pop exam board as well, because I've a couple of students who enjoy singing pop music, and so I've had to kind of diversify a little.
That's cool.
And the latest thing for me that I started literally last week is my group singing lessons.
Oh, lovely.
Because especially in the dance world, I do a lot of Latin dancing, and it's a huge world of very creative people. And quite often I'd have adults saying, "Oh, I've always wanted to learn to sing, send me all your details." And then they'd be put off by the fee for a one-to-one, Same with dancing, it's not cheap, if you want a one-to-one with your favourite teacher. And so I decided to give it a go. And I put a post on Facebook asking for volunteers to help me. I was quite inspired by you, actually, in your Reset and Manifest. You asked for volunteers to help you run a trial. And I thought, well, why don't I do the same? So I did a trial session with a small group of people that I already know from different parts of my life, who were all kind of rooting for me, who then were much more up for giving it a go. One of the sort of light bulb moments that I've had recently is that now I'm teaching online. Again, it's come after the pandemic. Before that, I was going to my students' houses. I can teach anyone, anywhere in the world, as long as the time difference fits. And I can be anywhere in the world teaching, as long as I have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So I invited everyone I know. And, a lot of the dance I do is Brazilian social dancing. I had a student from Brazil, a student from Paris, a few from the UK, and various parts of the UK who joined my group session, and who all were able to be part of one lesson with me, regardless of where they live. And so certainly when you ask what's next, I have a global vision lead for my business. Joanna's Music Box is going global.
Yes.
And I now have students, in various places in the UK, in Paris and Brazil. And I hope that it's going to spread even further.
Yeah.
With this business is quite referral based in some ways. A lot of my work comes from word of mouth. And so all my friends all over the world, and now they know now to spread the word. Whenever they hear of anyone, keep your ear to the ground. If you hear of anyone interested in music theory or singing, let them know, it doesn't matter where you live. And so, it's really freed me up again with all that, because, before everything was about location, and I was only teaching students in London within an hour's radius,
Yeah, absolutely.
To get to them. And so now it's all opened up. So, I'm going global.
I love it. So am I. I know it's the pandemic for you and I has sort of given us the chance to slow down and reflect and reassess, and then come out of it stronger and better. Whereas obviously, we can't avoid the fact that for some people it's been devastating.
Yeah.
But thank goodness we've been able to turn that into something and create something that's turned out to be beneficial, and not just helping yourselves and ourselves, but other people as well. That's the main thing.
Absolutely. And now the more people I can help simultaneously, the better. Which is why the group lessons are working quite well. I've only done a couple so far, but the group that started with me as volunteers have stayed with me, and a couple more have joined. So maybe I'll have 2 or 3 nights a week, or Saturday afternoon, where I'll have different groups. I may even be able to have a Brazilian group, all on the same time zone, and then a French group. And
that'll be so amazing.
That's the plan.
Absolutely.
Really develop that,
Thank you so much for being a guest this week. It's been amazing to hear about your journey and all the light bulbs and things that have been going off, and how you've coped with the pandemic and how you're thriving. It's really brilliant, really inspiring.
Thank you for having me, Lee. You're inspiring too.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Joanna. See you soon. Thank you for joining me on the Vocal Freedom Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we'll move into your day with a bit more vocal freedom, feeling that you can express using your voice and let the world hear what you have to say. Visit colchestervoiceacademy.com/podcast. Sign up to be kept informed as new episodes are published, and consider joining our online community. Membership to this will allow you to post questions to our guests, link you to show notes, social media links, and entitle you to exclusive offers from our guests. See you next time.